Good evening, dear friends. We are together in the 69th video of the Divine Order and the Universe Reading and Commentary series. This month we have a new commentator, my dear brother Tümerhan Meral, from Adana Spiritual Research Society. Welcome!
Greetings to everyone from Adana.
This evening, we will start reading the last chapter or third part of this book. And we will start reading with those sentences we like to repeat and try hard to understand. You, who can be you with matter and nothing with everything, and can adapt to the harmony of this everything, long for the moment when you will be of that harmony. Would you like to elaborate on that harmony?
With pleasure. The word harmony in this book means to be with and also to become able to unite with matter. You who can be nothing with everything is a very interesting phrase. Of course, if our dear friends read this book with attention, then they can get an intuition what this phrase means. The ability to adapt that harmony begins from the initial steps of the plan of duty on. Yes, there is a magnificent harmony in our universe, an immense and perfectly working system without any glitch. Yet, we, human beings, as creatures that adapted to matter in the hydrogen cosmos, we cannot now notice that harmony. We are a part of that harmony but we cannot comprehend it. We pluck some certain pieces off that harmony and call it my reality, yet this is not that harmony at all. We only live and experience some points, some cells, some specks of that harmony. Only when we complete and go beyond the matter of this hydrogen cosmos, or in other words, when we become able to be with the truly subtle matter, that is, starting from the initial steps of the plan of duty, we can adapt to those necessities and begin to become a part of that harmony. And eventually, at the uppermost point of this universe, that is, at the unitary, the state of becoming one with matter, one with its true state, and the state of adaptation not as parts but as a whole occurs.
Yes, last month, we had read and discussed about the unitary in detail. Still, we have some new friends watching our video and asking about the unitary. For them, I'd like to say that we are reading passages from the 17th edition of this book, titled The Divine Order and the Universe, and discussing the passages we read together in this reading and commentary series. Please, elaborate about the unitary a little, dear Tümerhan, and then we can start reading.
Well, very briefly, I will try to explain. We know that the reason for the existence of our universe is the evolutionary needs of spirits. Therefore, within the universe, myriad possibilities are provided to meet these different evolutionary needs of spirits. These possibilities, starting from the amorphous matter and the initial motion given to it, then follows a dark phase, later the hydrogen stage, then matter structures above the hydrogen cosmos, then transitions to the plan of duty. And ever-increasing possibilities for the spirits and the beings they built in the hydrogen cosmos, leading the widening the comprehensions of those beings, hence, their gradual development. And the development of beings and this widening or expansion of their comprehensions advance up to such a point that, all of the comprehensions that belong to the universe come together there, and permeate the whole universe, and the book calls this point as the unitary. All influences entering the universe and all influences reflected back to spirits filter through this point called as the unitary. It is hard to describe these processes with worldly concepts and terms, but still, let me add that an immense diffusion of the influences, permeating to each and every point of the universe, occurs after becoming filtered through the unitary. So, we can define the unitary as the field of unity where all knowledge regarding to the universe, all occurrences, all possibilities exist, hence, the whole order is actualized.
Also, we can describe the unitary as the uppermost point our beings can reach by ever widening their comprehensions and becoming beings in duty. Alright, let's start reading. The Earth is an organ within the solar system. As all organs, it also has certain life cycles, developmental stages, transformations, and innumerable states of equilibrium, which are disrupted and rebalanced by the uncountable influences it receives from the surroundings and above. And the explanation which we will make here about the forthcoming revolution, which is the last of the countless revolutions the world has been through so far, will make the knowledge in the last part of the book easier to understand.
Yes, as previously stated in this book and in our videos, the states of becoming organs and organizers are valid in every field of the universe. I mean, it is valid in the tangible material parts, as well as the subtlest parts. We will soon read that there is a core or nucleus in each system, and this is the sun of solar systems, and other planets are subject to this nucleus. And our planet, as an organ in the solar system, has a certain life cycle. This is a fact that can be explained by other cycles we can observe. Our planet revolves around its axis, and this is a cycle. It revolves around the sun, it's another cycle. So, we can consider everything as a whole of cycles within cycles. And as we said, the true needs are the evolutionary needs of the spirits. Therefore, there must be an ongoing state of entering the world school and of graduating from the world school. Then, this school should be open in certain periods, then after the graduation of its students, it should be closed. Soon, we will read about how this closing process also starts the new cycle's opening.
If our planet is an organ in the solar system, then our sun takes the role of organizer with a certain duty, target, and purpose. We already had read that in the hydrogen cosmos and in this solar system, our planet as a school for development of the beings has a very advanced status, and other planets in our solar system are milieux utilized by the beings for building bodies in the semi-subtle, intermediary stages before they begin to build plant bodies before building animal bodies, and animal bodies before building human bodies. In short, the beings can have extraterrestrial experiences before building bodies in Earth. Also, we had read about the beings in duty use the sun as a way station or headquarters, so to speak, in order to govern some situations related to our planet. Those beings in duty don't have bodies made out of the sun's matter, yet there are also simpler beings that continue their development in the sun. And as our scientific observations get better and more precise because of the technological developments, we learn more about the interactions between our planet and other planets in the solar system, and it becomes more obvious for us to see that each planet is an organ in this solar organization. And this ending of a cycle, or as you mentioned, opening and closing of the world school, these are mentioned or symbolically explained in many legends, esoteric teachings, and religious texts, that such ending does not happen only once but many times. And even within a cycle of world school, sometimes some students graduate earlier than the rest. If every point of the universe is governed by the cadres of beings in duty, then there must be beings that went through all those stages beforehand, so they can act as a support system for the new students. And also, we had read that every organ is governed and directed and encompassed by a system one level up. Then, the organizers and organizations governing our planet should be encompassed by ever higher organizations. In this sense, the divine order and the universe gives us the explanation of the mechanism, the model or the template, and you can apply this to a micro or macro modal, your organism, to a solar system, to a galaxy, or to the whole universe, as a model. In a way, we learn about the organizations we will become involved as we advance in our spiritual development, towards becoming of that harmony. Yes, let's continue reading. Approximately 70,000 years ago, there were mainly two great continents in the world. One of them was filling the space where the Pacific Ocean now exists. This was a vast piece of land, wider at the north and narrower at the south. Mankind calls this the continent of Mu. The other one was a vast continent, which occupied the space where the Atlantic Ocean is now. There were a great number of islands, archipelagos, pieces of land which today the Himalayas occupy, and other small continents, filling in between these two vast continents. That was the landscape of the world of those times. Therefore, back then, there was a different constitution of terra instead of the current state of geography. Do you remember James Churchward's trilogy titled The Lost Continent of Mu, The Sacred Symbols of Mu, and The Children of Mu? We had printed Turkish translations of these 3 books. We also know that Mustafa Kemal Atatürk was very interested in this lost ancient continent, its symbols and its culture. Moreover, we had read in the books about Edgar Cayce, known as Sleeping Prophet, who went into trance with the purpose of receiving information about the health issues of people asking help from him. And in some seances, he had revealed some information about his patients' previous lifetimes in the lost continents Mu and Atlantis. Okay, I continue reading. Upon these continents, humans who were much more advanced and civilized than the mankind of today's world had been living. Their knowledge and technical prowess were way beyond those of mankind in today's world. For example, they had discovered radioactive substances, radios, televisions, electronic gadgets and other technology, which have recently started to be discovered in today's world. This technology existed a long time ago, in comparison with the history of mankind in today's world, before the submerging of their world, and they had even discovered and begun to use atomic energy 1,000 years before their own revolution. Nevertheless, they also had relatively simple, even savage tribes, besides these well-civilized and advanced communities. However, even those savages were in a much more evolved state than the savages that exist in today's world. In short, mankind in the last world had a civilization which surpassed in every field that of today.
In this passage, we read that the beings that lived during the previous cycle of the world had much higher life standards compared to our current cutting-edge technological developments. And this information about their utilizing atomic energy 1,000 years ago before their cycle ends is very interesting. We started utilizing atomic energy more or less 100 years ago, and the discoveries and inventions we made so far are impressive. I mean, we are very advanced, yet when compared their 1,000 year of experience with atomic energy, then we can easily say that they were much more advanced than we are. Yet, at that point, I need to say that, no matter how far the humankind, or a country, nation, state is advanced, it does not mean that they fulfill the responsibilities expected from human beings in the same degree. Because of this imbalance, because the humankind of the previous cycle neglected the true needs of their beings but focused on the material needs more and more as their technologies became more advanced, naturally, they had encountered many troubles, just like the troubles we encounter in our times. Or in other words, their superior advancement in technology means that they were more engaged with its requirements, challenges, and this was bringing them harsher and harsher troubles.
As we ask each other every day if there will be a World War III, will one of the countries will use the nuclear arms or not? Obviously, the tests and trials of the previous cycle's humankind were not so much different than our current ones. And soon we will read that the submerging of those continents are not due ordinary geological processes. Some of our dear friends ask if geological research has any findings that belong to 60 or 70,000 years ago. There was some news, 10 years ago, about the submerged remains detected in the Yonaguni Islands near to Japan. Since then, there were more claims as such, but none of these are verified by the mainstream science. Yet, as we read on and learn about the active volcanic eruptions, earthquakes on the horizon, you may easily see that there couldn't be any remains surviving these cataclysms. In this book we read about such violent natural disasters that one wonders if these affected the whole planet or some regional zones. Esoteric teachings imply both versions. From the perspective of science, 60 to 70,000 years is not that long, especially in geology. Time periods are about million years. In that sense, the world cycles mentioned in this book should not be subject to natural processes of our planet. Otherwise, within such relatively short period of time, displacement of continent couldn't happen, because, Let's say mid-ocean ridge fault line separates the Americas and the Europe 1 centimeter per year, and in the last 60,000 years, it didn't change much for those continents. Even if those natural disaster happened, and will happen as detailed in this book, I think this is rather about humankind's tests and trials by duality. In Torah, it is symbolized by the war between the sons of darkness and the sons of light. So, at the end of the day, or more correctly toward the end of this world cycle, we are going through similar tests and trials as the humankind of the previous world cycle. What will we do with the nuclear power? We can use it and the knowledge about it for healing or producing energy, or to annihilate millions of people. There is such a thin line between these choices, and this thin line is made up of value differentiation and opposing sides of our conscience mechanism. As we learnt from this book, the beings progress by their conscientious choices between the sensuality, earthly cravings, and the intuition of duty. In short, we live the consequences of our choices and decisions. It is obvious that similar questioning, similar processes had been experienced by the humankind of the Mu continent towards the end of their cycle.
Considering the fact that recently we can discover the remains and sites of ancient civilizations of around 12,000 years ago only because they were on the land. I mean, we dig the soil to discover their remains. Yet, as stated in this book, when the continents or land masses sunk beneath the sea, towards the depths of the ocean, it makes their possible discovery much harder. When we discover remains from 10 or 12,000 years ago, we say, the history of the world is changed, yet, we could only recently detect such remains with our tools and gadgets. We should also take this into consideration when we think about such cataclysmic events, and this clue about their discovery and usage of atomic energy 1,000 years prior to the collapse of Mu's civilization can be thought of a trigger of such events, not due to the natural processes.
Let's continue reading. This state of mankind who had reached the pinnacle of development in the world, had developed in them such pride and an excess state of claiming omnipotence that this state led them to acts prone to disturbing the natural circumstances of the world by unconventional ways, through increasingly embedding them in the coarse matter of the hydrogen cosmos. And as a consequence of this they gave in to luxury, riches, comfort, matter worship, selfishness, and all kinds of desires. They immersed themselves in the coarse combinations of the hydrogen atom, and expected to get all their happiness from these combinations. And this was a last strenuous exertion of the beings caused by the material advancement and developments which had reached the final limit. A kind of degeneration. This degeneration is very natural, and a harbinger of every great revolution that occurs.
As we have been repeating in our lectures for years, we see that without degeneration, a regeneration cannot happen. There must always be a corruption, deformation beforehand. And we name it as entropy in physics. A disorder must occur for a new order to emerge. And we read in this passage that degeneration for the humankind of that cycle started with pride and an excess state of claiming omnipotence. That is, with the advanced technology they acquired, they assumed that they could disturb the natural circumstances of the world by unconventional ways. That's why we say that the submerging of those continents should be due to another reason and way than we could think by our knowledge of geology. The most important point we read here is that becoming immersed in the possibilities of the hydrogen matter does not bring an enduring happiness and peace to humankind. And the qualities leading to such demise are listed here as love of luxury, accumulating riches, comfort craze, matter worship, selfishness, and all kinds of desires. As we read and discussed about the conscience mechanism, we had mentioned those as the states, emotions, and behaviors belonging to the sensuality, to the earthly craving side of this developmental mechanism. So, the book expresses such emotions and behaviors as the self-degeneration of human beings.
I continue reading. In surrounding environments, developments advance communally. All beings that constitute that surrounding, from the smallest to the largest, develop and rise according to their degrees. For example, as mankind become the most evolved beings of the world, each of the other beings that live within the inclusion of world plans advances towards the higher stages of their developmental possibilities, and cancers constitute the most obvious example of this. Towards the last cycles of the world back then, some diseases had emerged for which mankind did not know the reason. One of them was cancer. The increase of cases of cancer among mankind is the degeneration observed in the cells, depending on the reason we have just mentioned. Each of the cells and organs in the human bodies is a material ground of life for the relatively primitive beings. They render their own developments in these matter fields, and within the possibilities those fields provide. A moment comes when these simple beings which develop in time cannot obtain the things they need to develop further out of the matter they are in. That is, these matter possibilities and conditions become too barren to let them gain further leaps. However, developmental leaps of the beings never stop, and they always want to go further without any restriction, whereas this state is seen as normal progress in the milieux which have abundant possibilities. In the matter milieux where such possibilities become barren and insufficient fields are left for the wider and further leaps, it causes some acts and behaviors of the beings which are observed as abnormal, unusual and degenerated, accompanied with their strenuous efforts, uneasiness, confusion and bewilderment. And such were the states of the beings which governed matter milieux, that is, the cells that become cancerous at the periods just before the submerging of the continent of Mu. Milieux of material development belonging to the lot of these beings who exist in the body organism had become unyielding for their further advancement. For example, a skin cell which constitutes the body has at best a certain field of functioning assigned for it. The somatic state of the body is not suitable for this cell to surpass it. Such a surpassing does not fit with the harmony of the body. The primitive being that made that cell a developmental milieu for itself could obtain the development it needed as it perfectly functioned at the beginning. However, a moment came that it completed this developmental cycle. It started to feel the need to prepare for the higher developmental milieus. Accustomed biological conditions and possibilities which that cell existed in were not in a state to respond to these needs of advanced activity. Therefore, the cell being became unable to fit into its body. As a result of this situation, that primitive being that had used a normal skin cell in usual and proper ways, then started to make a strenuous effort to orientate in a direction outside of the body order and harmony. This strenuous effort caused some states and situations of that cell within the skin community, which were not in accordance with that community, so that this naturally put into effect a disordered state in its development, which is called cancerous. It is certain that this cancerous state of the skin cell, orientated to the activities outside of the harmony and order within the skin organism, is merely the last resort of the being who tries strenuously to complete a developmental stage and to pass into a higher stage, but cannot find any possibility for it within the conditions it is in. As to the body organism which seems here as if it was wronged, actually, it does not lose anything, and renders the automatic service and assistance it has taken on in the issue of preparing ground for the evolution of other beings. By doing this duty, in the face of the mechanism of destiny, it will also acquire spatial merits, which is a higher manifestation of destiny, and so benefits from the wider possibilities of the passing to the higher plan, and this means its leaping to a further stage, its development. Therefore, there is no wrong or injustice. We have previously said that each individual of a 100-person communal plan obtains his own evolution by working for those 100 persons. Everybody, from the smallest to the largest, always gains leaps forward and rises by depending on another, exchanging with each other. In none of these acts directed to this ascension is there injustice, punishment, reward, malice, disaster for any being. Everything is the result of the acquired merits by the measurement of the mechanism of destiny, and of the effort spent on this path.
Here, in this passage, we encounter knowledge about the states of cancerization which is never heard of before this book's disclosure. Honestly, so far, we have not regarded this topic from that angle, at all. One of the most important things in this passage is the need to consider all of these as a whole. Yes, there is a transition, there is a revolution, but this transition is not only for the human beings because there are innumerable beings that coexist with us, plant beings, animal beings, different organs and cell groupings of plant beings and animal beings, just like we human beings have different organs and organ systems. And there are beings of all those organs, of all those cells.
Even in our intestines, there are millions of bacteria.
Exactly. The state of our getting prepared for a revolution or transition means that they are also passing through a certain stage in their development. Regardless we are aware or unaware of this fact, we constantly send influences to all those beings and cell groupings that continue to exist within our organism. They continue by our influences, hence, anything from us is essential for them. So, we can deduce that at the level of our being, we should be able to change and develop ourselves all the time, and at the level of our worldly life, we should be applying and implementing these changes and development. Why? Because we know that there is nothing inert or motionless in the matter universe. And as we just read in the previous passages, whenever humans remain inert in various ways, then many troubling events start to happen to them. And whenever degeneration begins, then eventually a regeneration must emerge. So, this state we call cancerization occurs because those cell group beings cannot meet their needs anymore by the influences we should be sending them. When this is the case, they are compelled to make a sudden rush toward a further process of development. And this sudden rush emerges as a contradicting process for the overall well-being of the body, a disrupting factor for the harmony of the organism, and as a result of this conflict, this state of cancerization occurs, which we consider as a negative situation. And we see that, in the last 50 years, there is a hike in ever-increasing numbers of cancer cases all over the world. So, depending on this reason stated in the book, it seems these cases will continue to rise. There is also material reasons for this. The declining quality of the foods we eat, our planet's receiving more radiation compared to earlier ages, etc. And also, at the end of this passage, we read that we have previously said that each individual of a 100-person communal plan obtains his own evolution by working for those 100 persons. Everybody, from the smallest to the largest, always gains leaps forward and rises by depending on another, exchanging with each other. So, what happens to us while those cells rush toward a further developmental process? Our entire mood changes, our way of seeing life changes. We go under many treatments, many operations, and consequently, we feel compelled to go through our own individual apocalypse, our own doomsday, and willingly or unwillingly, an increase in the level of comprehension, an increase in the existential development or spiritual evolution occurs. As a result of such processes, those beings continue their own development and their needs start to become met gradually but increasingly. On the other hand, the being that is responsible for governing that whole body experiences many necessary psychological states and moods for its further development.
We know cancerization as the excess multiplication of cells. So, this is a process where the natural function gets degenerated. In the book's explanation, it is because the given material system of the organism or body is not sufficient enough for those cells' beings. And this can be because of the air we breathe, the foods we eat, the radiation levels we are exposed to, and increase in the electromagnetic fields we are immersed in. As we use our mobile phones, Wi-Fi, etc. in small or large amounts, all of us are affected by these. And we cannot completely protect ourselves from these. And it is obvious that these degenerative factors will increase more and more, because we are not unlike those people of the Mu civilization that disturbed the natural circumstances of the world. What do? We change the genetics of the seeds, and also embryos. We poison the soil and water by using excess pesticides for agriculture. We pollute the land and the seas with the waste we dump on landfills and waterways. Microplastics are now even in our bloodstream. Maybe we will be faster than Mu civilization in degenerating our planet. We simply exploit the world matter relentlessly and mercilessly. Didn't we see the positive results in the air quality when the air, sea and land traffic ceased, and the chimneys of the factories and plants stopped working during the pandemic? As though our planet could take a deep breath of clean air. Yet the pandemic is over, and we now continue worse than ever. And also, there are meteorological experiments in the skies, nuclear tests in the seas that mostly remain hidden from the public's eye but explained away as conspiracy theories, and we don't know about their lingering effects on the natural order of our planet and of our bodies. In short, everything is affected in our planet, and our beings see that these bodies are not sufficient enough for meeting their needs, hence, the evolutionary needs of their spirits. They need more developed matter combinations. Consequently, beings rush towards further development in expense of the current bodies they coexist with. The current level of our bodies cannot respond the necessary developmental processes and needs of our bodies. We cannot adapt to the influences sent from our beings anymore, and this disharmony manifests as illnesses in every kind. Let's continue reading. Thus, during the last times of the previous world cycle, the beings had become very close, or at the final limits of their developments within the matter milieu they are. This situation was such for all beings evolving in the matter milieu at every stage from cells which constitute the bodies of mankind, and all other high world beings from plants to animals and to humans. For this reason, cancerous diseases had increased. And again for this reason mankind become dissolute, and begun to trash about with the need of going outside of the matter conditions, which become unresponsive to their further leaps. However, despite the fact that in order to satisfy their higher needs which spill over the conditions of world matter, should they have directed their activities to those conditions beyond matter. These conditions have been previously explained. Mankind could not do this, and had attempted to seek their needs within the conditions of the coarse hydrogen atom world which they live in. When they could not find the happiness they sought there, they strenuously made effort to console themselves by burying deeper into those matter. And this situation put into effect the scene of the degeneration of mankind, their becoming cancerous. And this is a necessity and natural characteristic which is generally seen at the beginning of every revolution, of every evolutionary cycle. In order to explain it well, we give an example. Imagine a penniless man dreaming of being a millionaire and expecting all his happiness from these millions. And after 8 or 10 years, he possesses that much money. When he sees that the happiness he expected to come with the millions did not come in spite of his current riches, what will he do? When he sees that the expected happiness did not come with the money, he will try to forget his frustration by burying himself in his money, and this will cause him to be confused and bewildered, whereas he could understand that this happiness will not come with money, and he could seek it elsewhere. But he cannot do this. When he cannot find the happiness he sought, and sees that he gets completely distanced from it, he falls into more unhappiness. In short, mankind during the previous world cycle, who completed their cycle by using the last possibilities of world matter did not want to think that expecting superior results from the world matter, which become unable to offer possibilities for further leaps of, the beings would be like pressing oil out of marble. And despite all the efforts they made, they could not find the happiness they sought in matter, and could not reach any satisfactory or consoling result for their needs of further leaps. This situation confused them more, put them into insoluble confusion, irritated and degenerated their states in matter. By the efforts and wishes to satisfy their essence needs of their essence beings of which they do not know and cannot find out about, mankind took the wrong path and got stuck into world matter. The meaningless pride, fruitless obstinacy, failures which emerged as every venture remained abortive that occurred in them as a consequence of this situation created confusions, disappointments, and turned them into a riddle, even incomprehensible to themselves. Then mankind became restless beings who attack here and there in vain, without comprehending what to do. This small observation, which we will remind you among the innumerable daily samples of small examples from such states of confusion and bewilderment into which mankind falls in similar circumstances, will be sufficient to give a simple idea about this topic. A child, who liked to kill birds with his slingshot a few days ago, comes upon the carcass in the road of a bird which died on its own, and feels pangs and tries to bury it, spending lots of effort. However, this pang of his does not stop him from killing other birds with his slingshot a few days later. It is possible to expand the scope of this small example among mankind, and to obtain possibilities of expanded observation about the states of confusion that mankind is in. And all these states were the expressions of reaching the threshold of a revolution. For surely there would be a reciprocity of the merits of the beings, who had now felt their higher needs and started to writhe about amidst those needs, which measured, calculated, and appreciated in the mechanism of destiny. And this was a great revolution of the world, which would allow them to reach higher spaces which they deserved. And this was the reason that the world was at the brink of a great revolution.
Well, our friends that read or hear this for the first time, they may think this is contradictory, because on the one hand, we read those people were merited for reaching higher spaces, subtler milieus, but on the other hand, we read that they were in the thralls of their pride, selfishness, and all other failures. How these two opposing sides complement each other. They are in a state to deserve higher levels but manifest totally opposite behaviors. This is something that needs deep pondering. Of course, there is an answer to this question, but I'd like to suggest our dear friend to think deep and find the answer by themselves. We forget that a very fundamental knowledge that has been given to humankind by the teachings of religions, albeit symbolically and by parables, is now given again in this book, in the divine order and the universe, but this time, without symbols or parables but openly, explicitly. This knowledge is about the true wholeness of humankind. There is a mechanism working as a trinity of spirit, being and body, and there is a working principle of this mechanism that expresses how the evolutionary needs of spirits are reflected to the being, and from the being to the body via the channel of consciousness. And the most important point here is to be able to remember what those true needs are. Remembering these true needs requires from us practicing some certain applications. And these certain applications are explained as the mechanism of conscience in the general developmentary progress of the being. And any shortcomings we have and mistakes in the applications we do in the mechanism of conscience lead we human beings to varying degrees of dissatisfaction, sensual and material cravings, and consequently, human beings begin to encounter troubles, sufferings, problems that cannot be explained easily. The example given in this passage for this human condition is striking. A child likes killing birds. When he encounters the carcass of a bird that dies on its own, he feels sad, becomes moved and works hard to bury it. So, the child knows what is right to do. Yet, after a while, his desire for killing birds comes back and he pursues to satisfy this desire. So, the most important task of human beings in this last period of this world cycle is to balance this dilemma of true needs and sensual desires, as much as we can. In other words, we must be able to determine which are true needs and which are earthly cravings, and then, to make choices and decisions accordingly. And if we disrupt this balance of our intrinsic duality unit, if we disrupt the balance by adding more values to the sensuality, earthly craving side, or to the intuition of duty side in expense of the other pole, then we cannot meet the existential needs of our being, and consequently, we cannot meet the needs of all those organs, organelles, cells that are essential parts of our organism, of our body. And when those needs cannot be met, those structures, although they are simpler beings, can protest, riot and rebel against the entire organism. We call this rebellion as illnesses and cancerizations.
Ah, those opposing sides of our conscience mechanism. For example, while people eat breakfast at open buffets, they glimpse some news clips on TV about the famine in Africa and dying children because of hunger. They stop for a few seconds, feel very sad for a few seconds, and then continue eating in excess amounts, without any awareness about why and how inequalities occur, etc. I mean, we experience such sincerely conscientious moments. These are transitory moments of waking up, but at the next moment, we go back to sleeping, to the unawareness, to our automatisms, our habits, our comfort zones. Well, in that sense, we are not short of the events and states experienced in the Mu continent before its total destruction. Therefore, this duality of opposite sides in the conscience mechanism, this developmentary motions created by choosing from either side and bringing out value differentiations, has such a quality for manifesting myriad plots and stagings of events that will motivate or compel human beings to complete their life lessons, so their beings can complete their needs and experiences. And at this point, we may remember the importance of making observations, because we don't need to have first-hand experiences of each and everything. No, we can take very valuable lessons by observing the world affairs, the emotional and mental states of other human beings. Now, let me check the questions. One of our dear friends asked, didn't the Mu civilization have any prophets to warn them? If they had, they wouldn't vanish. Well, I am sure each cycle has its own prophets, teachers, guides. Yet, the religious texts and also this book as well inform human beings that there will be end of the world cycle and why this is necessary.
The purpose here is not postponing or canceling that revolution. After all, this is necessary. It has to happen. Why? Because the entirety of those events symbolized by the apocalypse is the end of a period. Therefore, we must see this: each being needs to gain what it deserves. So, each being needs to pass to a space or milieu or level in accordance with its merit that it can be a manifestation of the divine justice.
Another question: is having an enjoyable and happy life in this last cycle a sign of merit?
It depends on what you ascribe to the state of enjoyment.
Exactly. As you said, this is relative. The version of happiness the Mu civilization pursued didn't satisfy them. This situation may be valid for the humankind of this last period of the world cycle as well. Please don't forget that we live in an abundant planet. It is rich with myriad possibilities to be utilized by each being in accordance with its true needs. I think the real merit is to appreciate this fact, and to become able to receive the real value of the events as we encounter them. Yes, with these words, let me say good evening to you all. Hoping to see you next week.
Good evening, everyone.